Hi guys, welcome back to my channel for your hearts and home. My name is Dee Dee. Welcome into my kitchen. Today I have a bit of a restock video lined up for you. I will be using freshly milled flour to make pasta, freshly milled flour to make sandwich bread. I'm also using Kamut Puffs to make Kamut Krispies, ice cream for an apple pie I'll be making. I'll also be making some chocolate chip cookies. So let's jump right into it. Before I get started today, I have to mill my flour. I'm using a flour mill that I got online, and if you'd like more information about this flour mill, I can link it in the description box below for you to do further research. So I'll be milling some hard red wheat to make sandwich loaves, and I will also be milling some durum wheat to make pasta. The two recipes that I'll be using, the one for the sandwich loaf and the one for pasta, will be linked in the description box below. Today I had to pull out my scale because it's really important that you stick to the quantities that are provided for you in the recipe. And you'll see me here taking my time to do the proper measurements before I mill. I find that if I mill my berries to what it's called for in the recipe, everything works out fine. The question is often asked, should we be milling enough flour to fit the recipe with wheat berries, or should we match the flour that's milled to what's provided in the recipe? I always measure to what I have in wheat berries, and again, things always work out fine for me. A rule of thumb that I have noticed that has helped me on my freshly milled flour journey is any recipe that is calling for yeast, you're going to use hard wheat for that. If there's a recipe that is calling for baking soda as the rising agent, you're going to use soft wheat. So since I will be using my bread machine to do the kneading of my loaf and I'll be using yeast, I am milling hard red wheat. Durum wheat, along with some other specific wheats, are good for pasta, and durum is the one I have experience with, and it has worked fine for us. It has a very nutty flavor, and it makes pasta time much more enjoyable for us. My son has said that when he eats the freshly milled flour pasta, it's more flavorful as compared to the pasta we buy at the store. He feels the pasta at the store is a lot flatter in taste. There's not much texture, there's not much oomph, but he prefers the freshly milled flour because there's much more for the taste buds. So all I'll be doing right now again is measuring out the amount of wheat berries I need to make the different things that I'll be making today. If you're new here, I'll share quickly why I'm using freshly milled flour. So in previous episodes, I've shared that when I was using store-bought flour, no matter the brand, if I had too much contact with the flour, say I was kneading the dough, I would end up with a topical reaction. Um, it was just an itchy sensation on the hands and nothing spread. I could consume the dough and it wouldn't be an issue. But since using freshly milled flour, I haven't had that issue. Freshly milled flour also contains a lot more nutrients than what you would find in flour that's bought strictly from the grocery store. Now, this is not to shame anyone for using grocery store flour. I still use flour from the grocery store. I'm still in the transitional period where I'm able to convert my recipes that I've been using for years and years and years to freshly milled flour. It's not a simple transition. Very rarely can you just pick up a recipe and automatically switch it to freshly milled flour. There's a little bit of technique, there's a little bit of a learning curve, and so I still rely on flour from my grocery store to help my recipes as I'm continuing to make the switch. But I do find that the loaves that I make are more flavorful and overall they're more nutritious. One of the great things about milling your own flour is that you're going to get all the benefits of the wheat grain. Once flour has been milled commercially, they tend to remove all of the positive parts of the flour, and so what's left over is essentially just this powder that is really not doing anything for our bodies. I recently learned about this in the last year or so and spent some time doing the research to find out what I can do to help my family in this area. As you all know, I'm a scratch cooker. That's how I was raised. And so we lived in an ingredients based home, and I've created an ingredients home for our family. We tend to have a lot of ingredients on stock, not necessarily fully processed or ready to eat meals. So it takes time for us to prepare something to eat. So I'm used to spending hours in the kitchen preparing a meal because that's how I was raised. In Jamaica, when you're creating a meal, it takes hours of labor and love to create a delicious meal. So that's how I was raised, and I feel like if I'm going to be in the kitchen creating these meals for my family, I want to do the best I can to ensure that they're getting the most nutrients from what we're eating. And so, besides the fact that I was getting a reaction to the store bought flour and was in need of an alternative, when I found out that the alternative provided even more nutrients, I was sold. Again, we're still in the transitional period. I still use flour from the store, and you'll see in today's video that what I do is a half and half method. So I will mill flour, and then I will use half of the recipe as store-bought flour. And this is because the gluten content in freshly milled flour is different than the gluten content from the flour from the store. And the gluten content in the flour will determine the outcome of your product. So here's a close-up of the grinder I will be using. It is not necessarily one of the grinders that people will gravitate to on the first go, but I would consider this to be an entry level grinder. I can get flour with this grinder in 2 minutes tops for small batches. As you can see, my hopper can't really hold that much flour, but for what our family needs, this works for us. If you have a cottage bakery, if you're baking 50, 60 loaves of bread per week and you need freshly milled flour, this might not be the best option for you. The cons of this machine is that it is very loud. It is very loud. On top of that, it also runs hot. So if you have the machine running for too long, then you have to worry about the machine getting too hot, and you also have to worry about the heat from the machine damaging your flour. From what I have used before, from my experience with this machine, it works just fine. I mill it for 2 minutes. I mill for a minute. I check on the flour to see if it's the consistency that I would like, and then I mill a second time just to ensure that I get what I'm looking for. Again, I mill in small batches. This has worked for our family. In this case, I'm only milling enough to make 2 loaves of bread, and then I'll use the durum wheat to make pasta. So I don't need that much flour at this particular time, and so for us, this machine works for us. If the time comes and I feel like I need to mill more, then I might upgrade to another machine in the future. But for right now, this works really well for us. I like that it's compact. I like that it's stainless steel. I like that it works very quickly. The only drawback for me, again, is that it's really loud. So you will see that the machine milled for a minute. I'm going to take the lid off my hopper, and I'm going to brush the flour down into the hopper. Give it a quick check to see if it's the consistency that I would like. At this point, it's pretty powdery, but I know it didn't show up on camera, but there's still a few wheat berries still in there that need to be grounded. So I'm going to do this again for another minute, and that will produce the powdery flour that I'm looking for. So you can take a look at what's going on in my hopper. Again, there's the first minute of me milling all those berries you saw me put into the hopper. The flour I could use just like this, but like I said, on a closer inspection, you'll see that there's still a few wheat berries that need to be grinded, and I'm going to do that right now. So after Checking out the top of my hopper, I'm going to run the mill for 1 more minute. I wasn't sure if this was something that we would gravitate to. I wasn't sure if this is something that I could keep up with because I do use a lot of flour and I do spend a lot of time already in the kitchen. So I wasn't looking for yet another thing to add to my plate of things that I needed to get done. But like I said before, this is really easy. It mills in no time, and this machine cleans up easily as well. So for us, this works out wonderful. And knowing that I'm giving my family a more nutritious meal is icing on the cake. So I've milled the flour I needed for the sandwich loaves. I'm going to put my machine to the side and let it cool. And while the machine is cooling down, I am going to put all the ingredients I need inside my bread machine. Now I'm using a recipe that I got from my bread machine. It came with the bread machine, and I'm able to use that recipe, tweaking it slightly. I'm going to follow the directions as indicated on the recipe card, but I will also be adding vital wheat gluten to the mix. I've learned along the way that if I want the loaf to rise as I am expecting it to, by adding vital wheat gluten, it helps with the elasticity and the production of the dough that I would like. Otherwise, my loaves have been flat and they did not come out as expected. I understand that some people might not want to add this extra gluten to their flour. That is fine. This has worked out great for us, and this is what I'm going to continue to do. Again, we are in the transitional period. We are still using store-bought flour, and we're using freshly milled flour now, doing it on a half and half basis. So I'm going to put the ingredients in. Half of it will be for freshly milled flour. For example, if my recipe calls for 4 cups of flour, I'm going to put 2 cups of freshly milled flour and 2 cups of store-bought flour. And to that, I will add the vital wheat gluten so that the extra freshly milled flour that I'm adding will have the gluten content that matches that of the store-bought flour, and it will produce a consistent loaf. Once I've gotten all the ingredients into my bread machine, I will turn it on. It will take about an hour and a half to mix all the ingredients and knead all the ingredients for these loaves. Alright, so now that I have my bread machine going, I'm going to mill the flour that I will need to make pasta. Guys, I'm really glad I found this recipe for freshly milled flour pasta in this pasta machine. I was ready to throw in the towel. I recently got this machine and I used it a few times with not so good results. But I found this recipe and it has really saved the day. I followed the steps to the T and it has worked out time and time again. And I'm just so gracious for other people who've gone before us who has left really wonderful, clear instructions for us to follow because it's making the transition so much easier. So similar to what I did when I was milling the flour for my bread, I'm going to fill my hopper with the desired amount of wheat berries I need. I'm going to run my machine for 1 minute. I'm going to check on the consistency that it's there, and I'll run it again for another minute. After that, I will empty my hopper and I will go ahead and make the pasta as needed. Okay, so now that I have my flour milled for the pasta, I am going to get all the ingredients I need into my pasta maker. I'm using the Philips pasta maker, and this is one that comes with many different dyes. Today I'm using the spaghetti dye, and according to the recipe, and again I'll link it below, it's very simple. You put all of the flour into the top. To that you're going to add some salt, and I measured out the salt earlier, and then you're going to close your lid. The machine comes with a measuring cup, and I'm going to put 1 egg and the amount of water that the recipe calls for in through the top of the lid once I have closed the lid. The only way this worked for me is by following the steps in the recipe that I'll link below. The machine goes through a 3-minute kneading cycle. Once the 3-minute kneading cycle ends, turn the machine off for about 15 minutes and allow the flour to absorb all the liquid that you're going to put into the machine. Once you have allowed the flour to rest and to soak in all of the liquid that you're going to add, you'll turn the machine back on and you will run it through the cycle all over again. So you're going to run that 3-minute kneading cycle, and after those 3 minutes, the machine will automatically start to extrude the pasta. Again, this has worked for me time and time again thanks to the recipe and the creator who put out these instructions. It's really important to do the hydration period because this is what works. It didn't work for me any other way, and I'm really happy to have found this because I was ready to throw in the towel. So it's 4 ingredients: freshly milled flour, salt, water, and 1 egg. If you look at the top of the lid, there's a little chute, and that's where I'm going to pour the egg into the machine while it is churning. The display at the top of the machine is very simple to follow. You turn it on using the on button, you press the start button, it will start to churn, and then you're going to slowly add the liquid mixture. Make sure you have really incorporated your egg into the water before adding it, but you're going to take your time and slowly add the liquid into the chamber. So right now my machine is resting. It's doing the 15-minute rest. And while it does that, I am going to be working on some Kamut Puff Krispies. These are equivalent to Rice Krispie treats, except I'm using Kamut Puffs. I was able to get these at a local store, and my children had never had Rice Krispie treats, but I thought this would be a fun thing for us to do as a family. They loved it and have been requesting it, and it doesn't last very long in our home. While we were on our little break the other day, we made this as a family, and it came out really well. Again, they loved it, and so they asked me to make it again, and so that's what I'm doing today. The ingredients are very simple. We started with some butter in the pot. We melted that down. We added 1 whole bag of marshmallows, the mini ones, and we allowed that to melt down. And to that we added some Kamut Puffs, mixed that all together. I added a hint of honey for a touch of sweetness, and then I set it in this pan that I have here. Let it harden, and then I cut it into squares or individual portions. So this is not going to win any awards for the healthiest treat, but again, we try to live in moderation, and so this was a nice something different, and the kids loved it. It's not something we're going to have every day, but it was something new to try, and I was just excited to see them try something new. They sometimes tend to be hesitant to try new foods, and so the fact that they didn't even give this a second thought and they were ready to be adventurous and to try something new, that really was exciting for me as well. And I had never made anything like Rice Krispies before, so this was new for me as well. And the fact that it was actually so easy was helpful, and I like that this is something that I can easily replicate. So now the 15 minutes have passed and it's time to restart my pasta machine. Again, I'm going to allow it to go through the full 3-minute cycle. It's going to sit there and it's going to churn and it's going to do its job in cooperating. And soon it's going to start extruding the pasta. I'm trying my best to get different angles for you to see what's going on inside the machine. Okay, so now you'll see that the pasta machine has started to extrude the pasta. I have put a container at the bottom so I can cut the pasta from the machine to size. The pasta machine comes with its own cutter. I'm just using my bench cutter to cut the pasta to length. Now you can make this any size you want it to be. When it's coming out, I try my best to move it around a little bit so that you can get some air in between the different strands. And then I'm just going to lay them down and allow them to dry out. Once it has fully dried, I will put it in a zip top bag and I will put it in my freezer for long-term storage. Now, this didn't really last very long because, like I said, my children love the freshly milled pasta. And once I have had it prepared and it's in the freezer, it's easy for them to just go get a pot of water boiling, put this in the pot, and in a few minutes they have ready to go pasta. And so I try to do this kind of bulk cooking so that they have this option available to them if in the event they want some pasta. So as you can see, what I do is once the pasta has reached my desired length, I just take my bench cutter and I just do one even swoop down to cut the pasta to the length that I would like it to be. So while this was going on, my bread machine went off and the dough is ready for my sandwich loaves. So while all this is going on, my bread machine went off and it is time to shape the loaves that I'm going to be using for sandwich bread this week. I am simply going to pinch the middle of this really large 2-pound loaf. It's not even. I could have brought out my scale again and did a perfect division of this loaf, but guys, it doesn't really matter. It's bread and we're not that picky around here. And so I just did my best to break it in half. Then I shaped the loaf and put it in my loaf pan, which already has been generously greased with some butter. I am also going to take these two loaves that I've shaped and I'm going to place them on the back of my stove so that they can do a second proof. This will allow the dough to relax, the gluten to continue to develop, and for them to double in size. So I'm just going to put them on the back of my stove, cover them with a clean tea towel, and give them about 15 to 20 minutes to rest and do a second rise. So the next thing I'm working on tonight is some chocolate chip cookies. You guys, we are hooked. This is not a good hook. And we have been eating chocolate chip cookies for a while now. And I know for a fact we have to slow down, but who doesn't want a good cookie? So for dessert this week, I am making some fresh chocolate chip cookies. I'm using some flour from the store because I have not yet converted the cookie recipe that I'm using to freshly milled flour. And until I do that, I don't want to mess with something that's working. So I'm just going to continue to use the recipe as it stands, and I will link it in the description box below if you're interested. Like I said in a previous video, cookies have never been my strong suit, but I'm really, really happy that I've able to figure it out and I've found a recipe that is now tried and true. And guys, the cookies came out so well this time. They actually have the shape of a cookie. They are round and they worked out perfectly. So I'm just going to measure out all my ingredients, add it to my stand mixer, and I'm going to get it ready for the oven. On this day, I didn't add any peanut butter chips. We just wanted straight chocolate chip cookies today, and so that's what I did. So now everything is ready. I'm just going to take my ice cream scooper. This is like a mega ice cream scooper, so these cookies are going to be gigantic. And I am going to get the cookies on my cookie tray. Look at that, you guys. Oh my gosh, I'm so excited about cookies, you guys. I love, love cookies. And the fact that I have found a recipe that works and a system that works for us, I am so happy. I will say that towards the bottom of the cookie dough, it was a little bit crumbly, which is why I stuck my hand in there to really work the dough together, but they came out great. So the cookies are in the oven. The bread is finished. And as you can see, one slightly bigger than the other. It's okay. They both taste great, and that's what I'm going after. Sometimes I like to put a little butter on the top just to soften it up a bit. I don't always do this, but I did that today. I had a little bit of extra butter left from what was not used for the chocolate chip cookies, and so I just rubbed that on my fresh bread right out of the oven, and it softened up the bread so nice, and it tasted amazing. Again, this was sandwich bread made with freshly milled flour, a half and half recipe. So my cookies are in the oven, the bread is cooling down, the kamut puff is all done, the pasta is drying. The last thing I have to work on today is an apple pie. Guys, you know my husband loves apple pies, and whenever I can, I make one for him. And so today I had some time, and that's what I'm working on right now. I make one pie at a time. That way I don't have a fridge full of apple pie that no one's eating because really it's just my husband who enjoys it. So I'm working on a dough right now, and I'll link the recipe in the description box if you're interested. And I made the dough earlier in the day and I put it in the fridge for it to rest. I don't love putting the dough in the fridge because then it becomes really rigid and difficult to roll out with my rolling pin. Today I was doing a lot and it stayed in my refrigerator for too long for my liking, and so it took a lot of effort. Even after allowing the dough to rest at room temperature, it took a lot of effort to roll out this dough. But you know what? It came out really flaky and delicious. So I guess that little bit of extra elbow grease was worth it. I did not grow up making apple pies. I did not grow up eating apple pie, so I don't necessarily feel like the expert in that department. However, I'm using a very simple recipe. Most recipes call for green Granny Smith apples, but we don't like Granny Smith apples. My kids don't like the taste. They just don't like it. And so if I'm making for family and friends who are coming to visit, then I'll buy the green Granny Smith apples and use them in the apple pie. But otherwise, I use whatever variety of apples I have on hand. My children tend to like Honeycrisp apples, they like Fuji apples, and they like Gala apples. So that's usually what I buy when I go to the grocery store. I just buy an extra bag of apples if I know that I'm going to make apple pie. And so that's usually what I have on hand. Some variety of ruby red or Fuji or Gala, Macintosh. Those are the varieties that I cook with, and they tend to be slightly sweeter than the Granny Smith apples. And my husband loves the apple pies. So if I don't have to, I don't like to change ingredients. If I can use something that we already have on hand, then why not? If I know my kids love Gala apple, I'll buy that. And if I have time, I'll make apple pie. And if I don't have time, then I know that the apples won't go to waste rather than buying Granny Smith apples and I might use a few to make a pie, and if I don't get back to the others in time, then the apples go to waste. That for me is a waste of money. So I know hard and fast pie makers will tell you to use Granny Smith apples, but frankly, because I'm just cooking for my family and I know what my family enjoys, I use what we have on hand and it works out really well. After rolling out my dough, I'm going to use my fork to create holes at the bottom to allow the dough to breathe. And then I'm going to fill it. The filling is also very simple. I took my apples, I washed them, I took the skins off, and I took out the cores. I then cut it into tiny strips, after which I added a simple syrup or simple sauce. The recipe will be in the description box if you're interested so that you can use this as well. This is the apple pie recipe that I've been using for at least 5 years. I think it's way more than that. But my husband used to enjoy apple pie in the holiday season, and it was just easier to buy them from the store. And one year I was like, why am I buying apple pie? I could just make one. And so that's what I did, and my husband loved it. And so now I just make it every time he needs an apple pie. I would like to branch out into other flavors. However, since I don't eat pie, I'm not going to experiment with what is already working. He likes apple pies, I stick to apple pies. Alright, so I'm going to do my best to close these two together. I'm going to pinch the edges so that they come together nicely and they won't fall apart. And then I'm just going to do a simple design on top. This time I'm going to use my brush and whatever leftover sauce I have and gently brush it on the top of my pie. I think that was a much better strategy than what I did in a previous episode of just drizzling on the sauce. While the apple pie turned out great, while it had great flavor and taste, I did not like the overall presentation at the end. I was much happier with the overall presentation at the end of the baking of this pie. Alright guys, so here is the spread for the night. The freshly milled flour pasta is still drying in its container and I will leave it in there for several hours. I'll continue to move it around so that it can dry completely. Once it's completely dry, then I will put it in the freezer for longer term storage. The Kamut Puffs have cooled down and all I need to do now is to cut it into individual sizes for individual servings. Check out the cookies, you guys. Again, they came out so much better. Each time I do this, I feel like they come out better and better and better. I am so happy that I found this recipe, but I probably need to find something else to make because we cannot eat these cookies every week. Here is the pie, you guys. I feel like it worked out much better using the brush on the top of the pie versus drizzling it on. I love the presentation there. It's so much better. Here are the two loaves of bread. As you can see, they're very soft. They are not completely cooled, and so I will not be cutting them right now, but I'll give it some more time. But they are very soft and very tasty. I did not film this, but I also made 2 cartons of ice cream to go with that apple pie. So here you have it, guys. Thanks so much for watching this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you were able to get some inspiration. If you have any questions about freshly milled flour, if you have any questions about any of the recipes that I'm using, you can check the description box. I will be sure to link all the recipes there. Any equipment that I use, I'll also put a link there for you as well. If you'd like to leave a comment, just let me know where you're watching from. Let me know how long you've been watching. I would really appreciate that. Let me know if you have any other concerns or questions, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one. Thanks so much, you guys. Have a wonderful week.